at evallab.unm.edu. On the left-hand side, you would choose workshop, and you'll come to the materials for this session. So before we get started, I wanted to just go through a few things that will make this workshop easier, perhaps. The first thing is that we'd like you to rename yourself, adding your organization. And if you look at my name, I've added the UNM Evaluation Lab. I'm going to go through these, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. Of course, we'd like you to mute yourself and remember to unmute when you want to talk. For taking questions, we'd like you to type a capital Q into the chat. And periodically, we have it set up in our presentation. We'll stop and go through those questions. So if you've got a Q, we'll ask you to ask your question, and we're going to try that as a way to make sure that everyone hears the question. And then we also suggest that you try the speaker view. It will be less distracting. It's less distracting for me when I use that. So how do you rename yourself? If you click anywhere in your Zoom image, this menu will come up and you choose rename, and then you just can name yourself whatever you like. But we'd like you to have your actual name plus your organization. The mute button is down by the bottom of your screen. If the menu isn't visible, if you just move your cursor towards the bottom of your window, it will show up. And this one is on muted with the line across the mic. And if you click on that, you'll be unmuted. To do the chat, again, you have to get that menu to appear. And at the bottom, there should be a chat icon as in the red circle. If it's not visible, you should see 3 dots. And if you click on that, it will give you more options. And then when you type Q to everyone, it will show up as from me to everyone. And anyway, you're probably familiar with the chat, but just in case, that's how the chat works. And then the speaker view, you can see in the red circle that when you should have this option, you can move your cursor to see it, of a dash, a rectangle, or multiple rectangles. And if you click on just the single rectangle, you'll see just the speaker. And yeah, so you can try that to see if it helps in this unusual environment that we find ourselves in. So for any kind of Zoom questions, please send a chat to Emma Tomingus Hatch. And if I go back and show you the chat, if you, where it says everyone on the bottom of the chat screen, you have an arrow. If you click on that, you have a choice of who you want to chat. And I believe if you start typing in that, the person will come up. So if you type in Emma, Emma's name will pop up for you to choose. And then we'll have these icons throughout to remind you to type a Q for a presenter and do a private chat to Emma if you have a Zoom question. Emma's our technical support person today. All right. Well, let's get started with the content for today. So the agenda is we're going to do introductions. So we'll tell you a little bit more about ourselves and about the Evaluation Lab, and give you an opportunity in small groups to introduce yourselves to each other. Then we want to tell you a little bit about how we came to be here today, which is basically our pandemic story and our Summer Institute remodel. Then we'll do a brief overview of evaluation the way we see it, which is as mission-driven. We'll share with you the principles that we've developed since over the past several years that the Evaluation Lab has been in existence. And then we'll show you a diagram of a full evaluation system. So you can see that the logic model, which is what we're going to do today, is a really important part of that, and that there's lots of other parts too. Okay, so I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of a story about how I came to be here today. I went to college and I majored in philosophy, which was, I don't know, typical, not very practical. And after I graduated, I became a community organizer. And I worked in Albuquerque for an organization called Acorn. I worked for a union in New York City, and I worked for a small nonprofit. And in all of those cases, I noticed that there was something that was really constraining the nonprofits and the social justice work I wanted to do, and that was the economy. And so I decided to go to graduate school to study economics, and I got sucked into the whole academic thing, and was very happy to land a job back in New Mexico at UNM. And so I did a standard academic research kind of focus. But once I got tenure, I was really looking to get back to community work. And so working on the evaluation lab, being one of the people who started that, and then working, I'm now the director of the Master of Public Policy. It's been just wonderful. I feel like I've returned to my community roots. Claudia, can you tell us about your
Yeah.
path?
So I have to admit I am an economist through and through. My undergraduate degree was in economics. My master's degree is in economics, and my PhD is in economics. My first job fresh out of college was survey design and data analysis. And it was not in economics, it was in a public opinion institute back in my home country of El Salvador, where I learned an entirely different perspective of understanding social issues. I did my master's and then my PhD with a focus on health, um, and particularly health policy. My degree is actually focused on policy. And about 4 years ago, Melissa invited me to mentor a group of students doing evaluation under the newly created evaluation lab. And I just fell in love with the work right there and then. And here we are.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so that was me and Claudia. We'd like to now give you an opportunity to meet each other. So we're going to put you in a breakout room for just 6 minutes, and you'll be there with 2 or 3 other people. Should be 2 other people if everything goes well. And we'd like you to just tell each other your name, your organization, what your organization does, and then the icebreaker, which is, if you could be an animal for a day, what would you be? And so Emma is going to copy those questions into the chat so that you don't have to memorize them. And momentarily, you will be asked to join a breakout room. So if you could join your breakout room and then answer the questions that are coming, that have been posted to the chat, and I'm going to time it. I wonder if we should stop the the recording during this. What do you think?
Then won't it do more than one video?
No, it won't. It will just be blank. I've done it for my classes. I'll just be quiet.
So I just wanted to give folks an opportunity to just share if you feel like it, if someone had a funny animal or someone is doing some cool work that you learned about in the icebreaker. So please just feel free to unmute yourself and say something.
We had a strong bird preference in our group. Half, 50% birds. Preference for bird's eye view and attraction to broad migration patterns.
I see.
That's funny because in our group we had the same thing. 75% were birds, and then I must say that Alex was wanted to be a sloth or a koala, which because she enjoys lying around in hammocks. And I said, well, that's a really great metaphor, you know. So.
Okay, and let's have anyone else want to share from your breakout room? Let's have one more.
Well, I learned there was a puffin. I never heard of a puffin.
Okay, cool. All right, so and those of you who are just coming in, welcome. You are in the right place. This is the Evaluation Fundamentals 1 workshop. And I also wanted just to do a shout out to the folks who are grantees of the Lano Foundation. The Lano Foundation was going to send a bunch of people to our summer institute. And so you're the inspiration for today. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so this is the of folks who registered. We've got a real variety of organizations. So we wanted to welcome you all. Okay, so just a little bit more about getting context for today. So there was a pandemic, and when I think back on it, it took us a surprisingly long time to realize that we were going to have to cancel our summer institute. It was hard to do that. And so we came up with sort of an in-between or like a placeholder, which is that we would provide some support on getting started with evaluation because people are ready to go despite the pandemic. And then the folks who go to our summer institute, they are invited to join a monthly learning community. And we thought, let's just make that open to us all, to anyone who's interested. And so I'm going to show you how to get involved with that. But basically, it's an hour and a half every month where we do a training. So similar to today, a little bit of a different format, a little bit less intensive, but it's a way to develop your evaluation practice. And then, of course, we're going to plan an amazing post-pandemic 2021 Summer Institute. I hope that's not overly optimistic. So let's just introduce you a little bit to what the UNM Evaluation Lab is. And I think it's a good way to understand who we are is to understand our mission. And our mission is to build evaluation capacity rooted in the needs of communities in New Mexico. And we added and throughout the world since we got unusual response, a widespread response to this workshop. So if you're not in New Mexico, we're delighted to have you here. We'd love to help you build evaluation capacity. So we have two main programs. The first one, which is what we started with, is our student fellowship. And students it's graduate students, they take a 2-semester course, they partner with nonprofits, and together they develop internal evaluation projects. And so the curriculum that we use for the students, we adapted for our Summer Institute. And the idea of the Summer Institute was to be able to extend our reach and do direct training. And then the learning community I told you about, that's a monthly way to keep people active in evaluation. So we are planning the 2021 Summer Institute next year in next July in Albuquerque. And then there's the ongoing learning community, and we encourage you to sign up for it. And I'm gonna go ahead and just move over to the website to show you what that looks like. So this website is at evallab.unm.edu. And this is a picture of our students presenting their work from a few years ago. If you click on workshop, you'll come to a link that will allow you to join the learning community. And so if you go there, you can see the topics that are going to be covered, and then you can click on this link to sign up. And while we're here, the slides are available to you, and we're going to be working with these documents. So if you're able to multitask and go ahead and get to the evallab.unm.edu website, that will be helpful for later. I just want to take a minute and show you some of what the Summer Institute looks like. This is how we have it set up. And the evaluation foundations, there's one more thing that we would have covered in that day that we're not going to cover in these two workshops. But if you look at the agenda, you can see the range of topics that we cover. And I'm just going to go through this quickly. So logic models is always first. We talk about the theory of change and the evidence base. We talk about rubrics, which is a great way to develop ways to measure everything that matters to you, including things that you think you can't measure. We talk about putting together an evaluation plan, how to ask evaluation questions, how to measure the seemingly intangible. And then day 3 is collecting data. And that's what a lot of people think about when they're like evaluation, and you're absolutely right. It's about collecting data, but you really need that groundwork to figure out what data to collect. We talk about working with qualitative and quantitative data. And then day 4, my favorite day, is the joy of evaluation. And we're going to touch on that a little bit about how evaluation is actually something that, if done right, you'll actually want to do. Imagine that. And then we talk about writing out reports and so on, and some other methods for collecting data. So what we're offering today is a piece of that. And also, we just want you to understand the context of what it is a part of. It's a part of a much bigger whole. And we've always been interested, sorry, I just got to adjust one thing over here. We've always been interested in trying to do evaluation quick. Like, can we just tell you about evaluation in 2 hours? And that's why we developed the Summer Institute, because we just couldn't figure out how to give you enough to really make you feel like you can do this, the whole thing. Okay, so the evaluation overview. The first thing is that evaluation should always be mission driven. And that's because evaluation can tell you if you're meeting your mission. And if you are, great, and evaluation can tell you how to do it better. And if you're not, evaluation can help you meet your mission. And the other part of this is that evaluation should be for you and not just for your funders. And if you tie evaluation to your mission, then you have a whole package where we all want to meet our missions, and evaluation is a way to do that. So that's a really important principle. So the Evaluation Lab, we just concluded our 5th year, and we've developed a series of principles of the way that we do evaluation, the way that we think evaluation works best. And the first one is measuring what matters. You may have heard of SMART goals, where the M is measurable. And we just think that that's a terrible way to start. You should start with what you care about and then figure out how to measure it. So a corollary to measuring what matters is that everything can be measured. And our workshop on Thursday will talk about how to measure anything, which we think is really important. The second principle is participatory evaluation, that it has to be everyone involved and as many people involved as possible. It has to be staff, it has to be participants, it has to be board members. It has to, if it's about mission, everyone is involved in mission, everyone needs to be involved in evaluation as well. The third principle is embedding evaluation, and that's that it needs to be routine. It just needs to be something that you always do. Maybe every 6 months you have a, every participant or client gets a survey. It has to be something that's routine or else it won't be effective. And then the last principle is mission time. And mission time is so incredibly important. And until we discovered this idea, we really didn't know how to get other people to do evaluation. And honestly, before we discovered this idea, we were grumpy about evaluation too. We didn't want to evaluate ourselves. We love evaluating other organizations. But mission time changed everything. Okay. And the idea of mission time is that you can't do really anything in a 2-hour workshop. And you certainly can't do evaluation sort of just like at the last minute thrown together. I mean, we do that. Organizations find that that's the situation they find themselves in. But you really need to dedicate time to things that are important. Okay, and so this idea of mission time, it comes from a book by David Grant called The Social Profit Handbook. And David Grant, actually, we're adopting his ideas about rubrics. But he, for many years, was a foundation program officer. And he just developed this, he's a very observant person and he has some great ideas. And I think that mission time is really just a game changer. And so the idea of mission time is that you move reflection work from meetings imposed by your evaluator to time imposed by you. So any of you who have worked with an external evaluator know that one of the key things that they do for you is set up a meeting so that you spend time thinking about your mission, how you want to achieve it. And so mission time doesn't have to be a big, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It just needs to be dedicated time for you discussing your mission. So it could be a regular agenda item on staff and board meetings. You could have someone, whoever in your organization is responsible for evaluation, meeting regularly to have mission time. And so in our experience in the evaluation lab, once we started calling our meetings mission time, it was like a sea change. It was like, oh, now we get to really think about what we're doing. And it was really transformational. And that's this last point, which is that it really brings joy because the work that we're all engaged in, the work that we really care about, a lot of times that gets like subsumed under putting out fires and doing the logistics and actually doing the work and taking time to reflect on what you're doing and where your energy is going. We have found that brings joy. Okay, so is this a joyful diagram? Yes, we need to add joy into this. But I wanted to go through this just so that you can see what we're doing this week and what else there is to do. So today we're going to do logic models, and those get you set up. Well, I'm going to let Claudia's going to do that part, but I'll let her explain more about that. But that really gives you the framework for your whole evaluation. And then, so that tells you what data you need to collect. And we've got at least 3 different ways to collect data: in focus groups and interviews, in surveys, and in program artifacts, like your administrative records or assessments that you do routinely. So that you collect your data, you put it through a rubric, and the rubric is basically telling you if it was a fail, if it was okay, if it was good, if it was great. And then you have to write it down somewhere so that you see there's people all over so that the people can interpret it. And that leads to continuous quality improvement. It gives you a deeper understanding of your theory of change, which is the foundation for all the work you do. And then it also gives you program adjustments. So now, having said that we can't figure out how to teach you evaluation in 2 hours, I do want to say that if you're collecting data and looking at it and then tweaking, you are already doing evaluation. And I would argue that all of you are always doing evaluation. We all are as humans. We do something, it works great. We're like, oh, got to do that again. We do something, it doesn't work out. The data that we're collecting is just our experience. And so everyone is engaged in true evaluation when they're paying attention and making changes. Okay, so I'm gonna pause now and see if there are any questions in the chat. Okay, so remember, if you have a question, if you type a capital Q, you'll have the opportunity to ask the question. And I believe that, yeah, I'm gonna stop my share and Claudia is gonna take over and lead you through some exercises. I do wanna let you know that we are gonna have a 5-minute break after the presentation before we get to work. This is gonna be, we're gonna set aside 30 minutes after the main presentation to work on your logic models with support from us. Okay, and I'll stop talking. Thank you, Claudia, take it away.
All right, sorry, was making sure I wasn't muted. So let me get started with, just make it big. Okay, with defining or going through what a logic model is. And you may have done this in your own organizations or not, that's fine, we're gonna walk you through it. So first thing to remember, a logic model is a one-page description of your program. And it really helps to have everything visually accessible to you in one page. And it provides you with logical steps from inputs to activities to outputs and outcomes. You can use it as you can create a chart to do that. You can make it very visual, or you can follow a more structured pattern and use a table. We'll show you a few templates. And it is incredibly helpful. If you develop it with a fellow co-workers in your organizations, you involve stakeholders, which include clients, and you review it regularly, about once a year, once it's developed, tends to help, and review it every six months to make sure that any changes you've made to your organization are registered. It gets everyone on the same page, making everyone, putting everyone together on what it is that your organization is trying to achieve and how you're going about it. And because everything is laid out so clearly, it gives you a map to designing evaluation activities that can help you assess how well you're doing in any aspect of your logic model. Activities in your outcomes, long-term, short-term, we'll talk about those. And to what extent you're being effective. All right, so let's lay out what's happening within a logic model. As I said, the logic model will highlight your resources or your inputs. What is it that you have? Which activities you're undertaking? What are the results or outputs of those activities? And what are the short and long-term outcomes that result from everything that you do and you have as an organization? A logic model also includes what are your assumptions. An assumption is what needs to be true for you, for what you're saying to happen. And I'll explain in detail what you think is happening in the community for the thing you're trying to take care of, and what evidence you have that what you're doing is working. It also takes into account external factors, things that are not within your sphere of influence. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about resources and inputs. So your resources, your inputs are things, the people, the human capital that you have and that you need to operate your program. Okay, so if you need physical space, do you have that space, whether it be physical, whether it be virtual? Funding, do you have the right type and amount of grants and donations? Do you have staff that is trained and aware of what they need to do? Do you have the resources to keep them up to date in their training? If you provide transportation or need transportation, do you have the vehicles for that? All of that gets laid out under this category. Your activities are literally what you do when your program is happening. So if you have a training program, then your activities will be your classes. If you are part of a behavioral health or mental health organization, your counseling sessions are activities, or group therapy sessions are activities. If you provide family services, home visits are part of those activities. If you are a grassroots organization and you organize events to inform people about, I don't know, new options to enroll for Medicaid, for example, then what event did you organize? Did you organize a community garden where people could come together? Those are activities that you undertook. Each of those activities results in some sort of output, and they're usually fairly straightforward in that they're easy to measure. So if you had a class, how many people showed up? If you had a community event, how many of those events did you put together in a year or in 6 months or the duration of your funding? How many attendees were there in your event? If you did home visits, how many times did you visit, period, throughout the year? Did your case managers visit throughout the year? Or how many times did a single family get visited and why? If you have, if you're working for a food pantry, how many items or bags, if you have packages, were delivered to people who came from the pantry? If you're in the business of providing information, how many people received your pamphlets, emails, or phone calls where they received that information? So they tend to be more things that you can count and you can report back to funding agencies. So the output is essentially the evidence that you are doing what you said you were going to do through your activities. Okay. And here come the outcomes. The outcomes are the actual changes in participants or clients of your organization. If you set up to train, did you provide actual knowledge? How do you measure that? If it was a skills-based training, did they acquire those skills? If you're providing support for families who need to improve their functioning, did that happen? If you were trying to shift the trajectory for an at-risk youth, did that life trajectory shift? So outcomes are evidence that your program is making the difference it's set up to do, and that an outcome is closely linked to your mission. You can think of your outcomes as short-term outcomes. It is what you want to see up to the point when your participant ends the program. So if somebody is with your organization for a period of 3 months, and during those 3 months there are certain services provided, did you achieve the changes into this client that you set up to do during that short-term period? The long-term outcomes is what happens to your participants once they leave. If you provided a service that was targeted at shifting the trajectory of a young man or a young woman, a teenager, did they stay in high school after they left your program? Did they enroll into a training program, a professional program afterwards, or did they not? How can you tell? Okay. Once you've laid out your inputs or resources, your activities, your outputs, and your long-term and short-term outcomes, you step back and start to think about, well, what assumptions do I need to make here to make sure that what I'm saying is going to happen happens? What am I assuming will take place? And what evidence do I have that what I think I can change is going to happen? In other words, what is the evidence that by doing what I do, I'm going to affect a change in my target population? So this is from an evaluation that Melissa supported along with one of our evaluation lab graduates. It is for a batterer intervention program. And here's what they laid out as their assumption. The first assumption is domestic violence is a social problem. That's the first thing. It's not an individual problem. It's not just up to the couple or the family. It is a social problem. So we assume that, and that's why it makes sense to have an organization that works with families to address that. It needs to be addressed through coordinated community response. In other words, it's not just one intervention. Usually you associate batterment issues to a more complex situation. And you assume that your work aligns with the policies pertaining to the police, courts, probation officers, providers, victim advocates, that all those interventions are aligned, and that these interventions can be effective, okay? There's more here, a psychoeducational and cultural responsive program. Intervention programs can increase offender accountability, change offender consciousness, and reduce offender violence. They're assuming that A leads to B, that what they're doing and the alignment with all these policies will lead to a change. What we did not lay out here is, well, what is the evidence? And there is a whole section that we do in the Summer Institute to talk about types of evidence. You can back up your evidence with existing academic literature, with reports from other organizations. Most of the time, many nonprofits have programs that are very specific to a need of the community, so no one has written about them, but there might be other programs that are similar and that can be used also as evidence. So how do you back it up? You can count on multiple sources for that. And you also write down your external factors. How does the social, political, and economic environment affect your program? And in which way does it work in your program's favor, or what challenges does it present, okay? And here is an example for the external factors for the same program that I mentioned in the previous slide. The idea that domestic violence is a private family matter persists. So it's an external thing. It's like it's a matter pertaining to partners. And the negative effects on child witnesses are not treated with enough urgency. Prosecutors routinely dismiss or minimize domestic violence charges or plea bargain to a reduced number of intervention program sessions or to alternative interventions such as anger management. And that is something that for this organization is somewhat out of their sphere of control. Offenders face delayed penalties, and in some cases, no penalties at all for non-participation. And in this climate, offenders get the message that domestic violence is acceptable, which undermines the battery intervention program effectiveness. So you can see how these are things they have to, as an organization, they perceive to be outside their realm of, or their sphere of influence, but that they're still influential in what they do on a day-to-day basis with their clients. Okay, so let me pause now. If there are any questions.
You do have a question in the chat, Claudia, if you look at your chat.
Yeah, hold on. I'm getting to it. All right. Okay, Lena, go right ahead.
Yeah, hi. I think you kind of started answering my question, but when we talk about outcomes and not outcomes, but the output and the number of events and the number of kids and the number of people participating, sometimes people miss the value, the quality, you know, not just how many events we put on, but the quality of the event. And I always, I mean, we do a lot
Yes.
with quality, but it's, you know, then you look at other people sometimes and it's just like, oh yeah, we put on this many events, and I'm like, yeah, but you know,
Yeah.
the attendance hasn't been great, or you know, you know, and then you do mention it in the outcome, but I think there's more that needs to be put in the output about the
Yes.
quality, right?
Yeah, fully
You have
agree.
to measure that.
I think you would thoroughly enjoy our Thursday session because it touches directly on that. Um,
And how to
it-
measure it.
you have to measure, and you have to find a way to measure, and for that you need to define what that quality looks like. You can definitely create, and this is something that it's a guiding principle of the lab. You can measure everything. You just have to be clear and define it, and that's what we expect to walk you through on Thursday. Now, if you are measuring the quality of your event, definitely still an output of your activity. If you are measure the extent of effectiveness of your event on your participants, I would definitely place it under the output category, because it is an effect kind of thing.
The impact.
The impact, totally.
Yeah, but how do you measure? Yeah, so I think part of the output needs to be quality, and then how to measure it. That's the tricky piece.
Yes, and I don't mean to. I know it sounds like a total shameless plug to keep you hooked for Thursday, but I promise we'll walk you through that. I actually added an example of the evaluation Melissa led last year that dealt exactly with those hard to measure things that are fluffy, but from a traditional measurement point of view, but are very real and part of our day-to-day practice in the community.
Great.
So
that's really what I want to hear. I'll be there.
okay. And Beth is asking, if we have more than one program, do we create a logic model for the organization or for each program? You can do both. When programs are large and fairly complex in their own right, you can do a logic model for that specific program. For many organizations, there's usually one big program that is about 80% of the organization, and you have other smaller support programs, like you can have referrals, you can have other smaller programs that are around a bigger program. If you have a program that's that big, or you have multiple fairly complex programs, it's worth taking the time to create independent logic models. My recommendation is that you don't forget to do an organization-wide logic model, because that's where you really put together what you are about as an organization. It's almost as if you're taking a picture of what the identity of your organization is. So I've run into cases where you have organizations with multiple programs and a single logic model, and organizations where there are logic models for different programs, but they don't have an organization-wide logic model. And it creates a little bit of a split personality within the organization. There's nothing wrong with having multiple objectives as an organization, but it really helps bring everyone together when you have that one unified view. Okay, Anjali, and if I'm saying your name wrong, please correct me.
No, that's correct. Thank you. If you have participants that are in your activities, but they're also in other activities from other organizations, what are some ways that you can distinguish the effect of your specific activities and try and filter through any overlap that might occur?
Okay, so let's put it a little bit concrete. Let's say you have a behavioral health center that provides therapeutic services for victims of domestic violence, but then they also work with an organization that provides free legal aid. How do you split that up from the process? So the first thing is they're confounding. they are confounding in that if a person is getting legal aid, for example, to establish a restraining order against somebody who has abused them in the past, that distancing will have an impact from the restraining order, for example. So you can actually, if you design your evaluation, and we're going into data here, if you're designing your evaluation, first define what the outcome of the clinical service is, right? What is the desired outcome of clinical, and define it very clearly. The beauty of clinical outcomes is that there's a lot of research out there for that, so you have a lot to back you up. And say you have a program that is very unique to your town, you're providing a very unique kind of service, define the outcome of your service. And you can, if you want to report, say you're trying to report, this is what happens when they receive our services and legal aid from this other organization versus people who do not. As an evaluation, you can compare people who are just in your services, receiving similar clinical check-ins every so often, and legal aid versus somebody who's not receiving that legal aid and going through a similar situation. So you can have that comparison between the two, but that goes into more the data collection design. What I would argue first, and this is something that is super tempting, define the outcome very clearly ahead of time before diving into any design kind of steps. But if you have that clear and ready to go in your organization, yeah, I would argue for comparison. Yeah. I think. Anybody else? You can just unmute and ask if you feel like it too. All right. So if there are no more questions on this, let me walk you through a couple of templates of rubrics that we've used in the past, and then Melissa is going to walk you through a couple of examples. So let me make this big. All right. So this is your more traditional example of a template. You start with what are your resources, what are your activities, your outcomes, short-term and long-term outcomes. This is very a classic logic model template. And here at the bottom, because remember, you want everything. This is a picture or a shot of your organization. You have your assumptions. What makes you think that what you're doing will lead to the change you have ventured to effect? So what are your assumptions, and lay out what are your external factors, right? So if you have, like in the previous example I talked about, if you are affected by the policies of state or federal organizations that are completely outside the realm of your realm of influence, that goes in there. Okay, so fairly straightforward template. You can have more flexible templates too, like this one, and we've used this one as well. You have your inputs, and you can just link your inputs specifically to your activities, right? Which inputs? So if you have to meet people in a physical space, those resources will be linked to activities that happen in a physical space. You can group your activities by program if they're not overlapping, and link that to your outputs and then to your outcomes. And these arrows are just suggested arrows. You can move them around as your program calls for. And again, your assumptions and external factors are listed in here. So before I go, so these are the two templates that we have. There are other templates out there depending on the criteria for evaluation. You can use whatever you want, but these we find are fairly straightforward and somewhat easy to use. And I'm gonna pass it down, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna pass it to Melissa for her to walk you through a couple of examples if you don't have any more questions for me.
Claudia, can you just go ahead and show the slide? I think that will be easier.
Yes,
and I'll just talk through it.
All right, no problem.
So this is a logic model that I helped a group of stakeholders for the New Mexico's battery intervention programs. And so this was definitely met our principle of participation, so that it was CYFD as the funder, and then they got together a group of providers. And so we literally put up around the room big sheets of paper that said resources and inputs, activities, outputs. And then we had people just list them. And that's what we're going to ask you to do just in a few minutes when we go to the work session. And then once we had all of those lists, we organized them. We saw that some were activities by partners, and some were activities for providers, and some were activities from the CYFD, from the state itself. And so that gave a little bit of organization to the model. So I don't want to read this like step by step, but I do want to show you how this gives a picture of what this program would do. And so we're going to ask you, or we always recommend to start with the outcomes, because that's what we're trying to do, and it's a really good way to start. And so here you can see their long-term outcomes for this batterer intervention program is reduced violence, reduced recidivism for crimes of violence, no abusive behavior, positive impacts on family from change in behavior, participant has a positive place in society, and participant models accountability in a way that contributes to a positive change in community consciousness. So those are the long-term outcomes. And then the short-term outcomes are more immediate. So accountability is really important in these programs. Emotional self-regulation. This has no abusive behavior as well. Safety as a priority. Emotional and physical safety. Understanding, so offenders are more knowledgeable about domestic violence. Other treatment goals are met, and reduced recidivism as a short-term outcome. And so then if we go back to the first column, which is resources and inputs, so the partners in this program are domestic violence advocates that coordinate the training, the court system, so the referrals come from the court, and then those partners get monthly reports as part of the program. I'm reading across now. And the outputs are things that, like the monthly reports that are happening, the number of participants completing the required weeks of program, and so on. And then if you go to providers, their inputs are training, leadership, group facilitators, counselors, meeting space, evidence-based tools, state-approved curriculum. There's some other stuff in here. Again, this is because I wanted to get everything down. And facilitator skills, the activities, this basically, everything that they do. They conduct group sessions, they do assessments, they do gender-specific assessments, they do a mental health screening, and so on. So those are all the things that the providers may do. And then we have a number of things that are evidence that they're doing their work, which is number of participants, attendance, assessments completed, number and type of referrals, documented treatment and safety plans, and supervision. I'm going to show you a logic model. The second one I'm going to show you has more of the quality stuff that Lena was brought up, which I think is a really excellent point. And then the state, so there are statutes that require, there are state laws that require a better intervention program for some DV convictions. They provide funding and they do audits. They approve the providers to provide these services. And they produce an annual data report. That's what the providers have to do for the state, and so on. And so this was always the first step of a project where we're now collecting data to track recidivism for this program. So really important first step. I think it was incredibly important for the providers to be able to list those external factors, because they're a tiny little piece of a huge social problem. And so that was something that was really important for them to be able to articulate, right? You probably know a lot of time your funders are like, well, how did you reduce poverty? How did you increase community health? And these are things that are really big social problems. And so it's really important for programs to be able to define what it is that they can reasonably affect. Okay, next slide. So Claudia and I wanted to show you a few other ones that weren't so by the book or filled in the boxes exactly. This was a logic model developed again with a group of people starting a new program. This is a program of, oh, I'm spacing on the name of this organization. It will come back to me. So you can see that in the activities, they group them under basic safety and needs. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this program. So this was a drop-in center, New Day, for some funding that New Day got to serve homeless and other at-risk youth. And so there are things that were really important to them, and they also show up in the logic model. So it's really important that that youth advisory council at the top, that's such an important part of their program that they that needed to be set apart. And you can see that there's an arrow to the youth participating in that council that also creates some of the outcomes that they're looking for. And so their activity session, they have lots of activities, and it was broken up in terms of this hierarchy of basic safety and basic needs, relationships, mastery, and empowerment. And so the logic model can be more than just a list of activities. It can include things that that are important to your organization. And then down at the bottom, another thing that was really important to them is that it was a community effort, a collective impact project. And so their partners are really important. Let's go to the next slide. So this is for the organization PB&J, where the Evaluation Lab has been working with them for 5 years. And actually my relationship with them goes back further. And so this logic model, there's some things that I don't see activities here, although activities are under program. And this goes to, who was it? It was Beth's question about having a logic model for every program or having an overall. And so PB&J has, I'm going to say 1 million, but it's not 1 million. They have probably more than a dozen separate programs. And it was really important for the organization to have everyone on the same page, literally, to understand what is it that holds these programs together. And so under their program category, this is where they develop, okay, the thing that makes all of our programs the same, the thing that ties our programs together, is this heart-centered approach. So that was really important for them to get that down. And so I just want to let you know that you start out with that. You can start out with one of our templates, but you can definitely add things that make, this should be a representation of your program. And I see that there's a question. I don't think I wanted to say anything else about this, but just to show you, that there's a wide variety of what a logic model can look like and what it can include. And these are included if you go to the evallab.unm.edu and click on workshop. This is the 3 logic models that we showed you here. You can look at them more closely. So what is the next slide? Okay, so let me answer the chat from Beth.
So my question is, there's a lot of information that somehow we are lumping together with evaluation that what I'm seeing from what you're presenting probably shouldn't be, and I just wanted you to speak to that. And that's in grants, the kind of demographic information that funders ask for, that also requires a lot of collection in terms of ethnicity, in terms of LGBTQ or single and all that kind of stuff. And can you speak to, I guess, the best way to separate it out, or if it's at all related to evaluation?
Yeah.
Well, I think that if, oh, Claudia, why don't you go ahead? This is your session.
Oh, no, that's fine.
No, go ahead.
So there are a couple things. There is the issue of grant requirement. So if your funding requires you to collect certain data, then it has to do with compliance. You have to have it. So having said that, the other thing has to do with which population you are serving and it goes back to your mission. So if a funding agency is asking you to collect data on how many Spanish-speaking Latinos you're serving, and that was part of the target population you wrote down in the grant, then that is just reporting that you are meeting the goal of the grant, which hopefully is aligned with the goal of your mission. So I would argue that they can be separate if you have to do compliance-related data collection. But if you're collecting data for particular groups of population, including demographic data, which we collect all the time at the lab, that can also be pretty informative. We collected data a while back for one organization where they found that they were not necessarily targeting exactly the population they want to target, and it was demographic. So it depends on the focus. I would argue that you have to collect data for compliance, but some of those requirements might also match your mission. Melissa, I don't know if I missed something that you were gonna say. No, okay. Beth, does that answer your question a little bit?
I think I'm thinking more like down in the weeds about like where we save the data and how we access it, and is that
Gotcha.
a part of our evaluation plan?
Right.
That kind of thing.
So yes, it's first of all, I want to share that is not an uncommon problem. It is extremely common problem. The whole data collection, organization of data sources, and pooling of data. Two, it has to do with organizing your data as a function of your own evaluation is important. So I would agree with you that they are related, though strictly speaking, data organization, pooling of data is also an operational issue. Where you collect it, who is assigned to pull it, are they trained to pull it and to create the reports you want to get? But all of that is way easier if you have a logic model and a roadmap of why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it, which is what your logic model collects. So definitely having the picture of the logic model before you embark in any reform of your data collection and summary systems is definitely a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that answers that. Thank you.
Okay. Anjali had another question.
Yeah, similar to Beth's question, under what category would you put like the characteristics of your target population, your participants, and the things that they will bring into the experience, prior experiences or learning preferences or mentalities, attitudes? I mean, would that be an input?
So remember that your logic, right? So if your participants are part of the activities or an active part of the activities that you are conducting, definitely it is an input. If it's something you're trying to change, then I would move it into the other end of the logic model. Yeah. Matthew, go ahead.
Thank you, and I'm sorry if I missed a little bit of my question is regarding a database. We have a lot of data from our clients. We call them core members. We serve a little more than 200 every year. We collect demographic data, age, economic status, a whole wide variety of information about the number of trainings, their graduation rates, and we try to track them. Do you know of a database system that is affordable for nonprofits that we can take the next step and use to query the data? Because it'd be really handy to know how to compare data from year over year or within populations, males and females, or we have an Albuquerque program, we have a Taos program, and it would be nice to query the information that we get from our data collection to be able to compare and evaluate. So wondering if you know of a database program that works for these purposes.
Claudia, can I take this one?
Yeah.
So really great question, Matthew. We know that some of our partners have used packages that you can buy, and they're expensive. One of the things that we've been working on with one of our partners is Salesforce, which is, they have a deep discount for nonprofit organizations. And there's Adelante actually has a group that is set up to help nonprofits. So that's an option for you. And that's part of also, like, we show, like, I'm curious, how are you collecting your data now?
Spreadsheets.
Yeah. So we actually, we have in one of the things that we train on is using something like Tableau, where you can actually, and there's Tableau, trying to think again. They also have a nonprofit license, which is really affordable. I think it's like $60 for a 2-year license. And that's a way where you can actually bring your data from Excel and do exactly what you're talking about, separated by year, separated by gender, and so on. So I don't know of any like one great fix for this. And I'm trying to remember another one of our partners. Claudia is suggesting that we just talk about this after, but I do think that this is something that we're aware of in the evaluation lab, and we would like to come up with a solution for it. But let's talk about it. We can talk about it after privately, but I know we would love in the evaluation lab to come up with some kind of straightforward thing, especially taking your stuff that's already in spreadsheets and moving it out. Okay, so I'm going to cede the floor.
I
So
would appreciate that. Thank you.
there are 2 more questions. Let's address those, and then let's move into our work groups. So, forgive me, Reddy? I'm sorry, I am totally
Hi.
butchering your name.
Redius.
Redius.
Thank you all so much for organizing this. And sorry, I joined the webinar just a little bit late. I work for a gun violence prevention organization, and we do have this is our 2nd year program where we provide sort of money, allocated money from our end to our grantees so that they can support. Basically, the program is to support local violence intervention and prevention organizations in cities with high rates of gun homicides and assaults. So what I have been trying to do is really defining the metrics like participation, learning, organizational capacity, and whether they expanded their programs after they received our grants, and also engagement at the community level. But at the end of the day, what we want to really assess is if the organizations are actually helping participants, especially young participants, because those are the target group, whether they're working on hospital-based interventions or group-based violence intervention. At the end of the day, is to really help the young people who are on the street, off the street, and so that they get the right mentorship and the right resources so they can have better jobs or better education and get, or at least address their trauma. So my question is, if I want to design the short and long-term outcomes, is it possible to not only look at the organizational capacity or participation or the type of programs, but also include to some extent whether the young participants on the ground are also reducing their interaction with violent groups and so on. I guess the idea of like designing logic model in different ways is very appealing to me, but I also don't want to really go off track and merge both organizational outcome specific points that we want to look at, and then not merge it with the youth specific, who are also the participants. I don't know if that's clear, but I went around at the end, but I hope that's clear. I can clarify or have follow up if that's not clear.
Okay, so if I, and please correct me, so if I understand correctly, so you are supporting organizations to do this work.
Yes.
Is that correct? All
Yeah.
right. So it's a, what you're trying, so if I understand your question correctly, how do you maintain your own evaluation as an independent organization that you are your own or evaluation? And how do you evaluate whether the support you're providing is leading towards the outcomes that you expect the funds to address, correct?
Yeah.
So one approach to that has been suggested is to, and this is uncommonly done, but it has, at least anecdotally, I have heard it to be very effective, is for all agents, like pretty much the organization and you, to be involved in the design of the logic model and the evaluation tools. So that your organizations that are being supported as well as you are on the same page of what is it that you want to see. Mm-hmm. And what can realistically be achieved. Because the best people to tell you what's realistic with certain programs are the people who are implementing them, as well as the participants. So something that is inclusive in defining the outcomes as you provide the support will give you an aligned set of objectives and measuring tools for what you're trying to get at. But on your own, you could conduct your own, but I don't know. It might be that you miss something in your data collection and you might not capture the full effect of the program.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up? Just the metrics I mentioned, participation, learning, how much the youth are also learning from the organization, and also organizational capacity, because like you mentioned, I think the organizations will be at a different level. Some of them might have capacity to actually do monitoring and evaluation, and some of them may not even have the staff members who can conduct this type of study. And expansion of programs, and also to some extent engagement on the ground, whether it's with community or other organizations. I'm at this phase, but I just wanted to share that out loud with this community, if that makes sense. But yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. We're going to, we have one more question from Zachary. Zachary, if you don't mind, we're gonna go into breakout rooms right now, and you're welcome to stay behind and talk to us and then join your group if that's okay. And Emma, go right ahead and do the working group sessions. And for those who wanna continue talking along the lines of Beth's question on data, you're welcome to stay at the end too. For that discussion. But for now, let's just go into our work groups. Let me give you a few suggested steps if you have not developed your logic model. If you have one, this is a good opportunity to review it. So I would recommend starting with outcomes. Use your program's mission and vision statement. It tends to be a very helpful way to lay out your program outcomes. Then move to activities, make a list of everything you do. And it sounds like a simple thing to do, but it really gives you a good picture of everything you do, including activities that just get taken for granted but are important. Then move to your outputs for each of those activities, and then think about resources. Resources are super easy to think about, so it's better if we leave them for last. Not all of you joined with colleagues from your organization. So for those of you that have more than one person from your organization work together in your logic model, we're gonna put you together in the same group. And we recommend you designate a note taker. If you are by yourself and working with other organizations, work on your own for 20 minutes and then share with your group for 10 minutes, okay? And then we will share together in the main session just 2 or 3 organizations that might wanna share their work. We were gonna do a 5-minute break. To be honest, I don't think we can afford it. So we're gonna go and head out into the group sessions right now. Okay.
I want to also, I'm sorry, I want to also just let you know that if you go to evallab.unm.edu, that's where the templates are. I guess we had that in the slide after all. Sorry about that.
So it's this one right here. Okay, and you remember there is ask for help. So just click on that button and we'll come into your group if you need us.
Claudia, you might want to post the instructions. I'm trying to find it on the OneDrive, but you might want to post it in the chat because some people had already joined their groups.
Okay. I'll put a template. Did the person who asked a question stick around, Zachary?
No, he joined his group.
And is it set up for 30 minutes?
Yes.
Great. Okay, do you see the email from Sarah saying Casa de Salud, there's no one else in her breakout room?
Let me find her.
Oh, Sarah, you were all alone?
Yeah.
Oh.
Is it all right to ask a question right now?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there going to be the possibility of a longer kind of training in the future around some of these things?
You mean around logic models?
Yeah.
Yeah, next summer.
Okay.
But like what you can do now, and you don't have to go into a room to do it, is that we want you to look at the templates and just like, I think it seems really overwhelming, but when you start to do it, you might feel like, oh, okay, I can do this. And so we're setting aside this half hour for you to work on it. And then we're going to come back and talk about the logic models.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we definitely do some of this already at the clinic. And I've applied some of this to some of the programming that I'm involved with. It just feels like very overwhelming, I think, to do in 30 minutes right now, but I will try.
Yeah, I think getting started, you can get started.
Okay. Okay. And then next summer, is there a way just to keep, I guess, just in the loop of when you all would offer?
Yeah, so one of the things, and at the end of the presentation, we'll put this up again, you can join a monthly learning community. You can actually, it has topics, and so there's ongoing training, which we're offering to everyone throughout the year. So there is more than just this one chance to get at it. I don't know, Claudia, did you want to add anything else?
No, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And Sarah, I added you to a room if you want to join a group.
Okay, sure, I will. I think that would be helpful for me at this point. I will try and go there. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Claudia, maybe you can privately chat Zachary.
Look for him.
Oh, we don't really have a half hour, do we?
No, we're just gonna have to give them like 20 minutes and then bring them back in. Yeah, maybe underestimated the Q&A.
Yeah. I'm just gonna look at how many slides do we have after? Oh. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, guys, so what should we do?
think we get them back. We let them out like 3 minutes ago at 11:45. Bring them in. I mean, because I think part of the richness of the experience to see what others have done. I cannot join any room. Like I don't see the option for me to join any room.
Oh, is anyone asking Emma for you to go in?
No. And
Okay.
the reason you can't join is because I didn't assign you.
No, I'm saying is if somebody, usually if I am the host, I can see the rooms and I myself can go into a room. But that's not an option here for co-host.
I
guess if someone needs help, I'll have to make you the host so you can go in.
Or you could just assign us to the room.
Ah, smart. Yes.
But I mean, if they ask for help, if not, we can stay here, no problem.
Yeah, no one's asked yet.
So up until the question and answer, we were on really good. It was going to be like at a quarter after.
It's okay. It happens. And it's a good sign of engagement. Like it's not a bad thing. Yeah. It is impressive how much overlap there are in the issues.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I like your idea of working on something that is like more like shared data management principles, something like that.
Well,
developing a tool like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why that Salesforce project we did with PB&J was so helpful, I think, to understanding. But like, you know, Enlace has Apricot or something like that. There's a couple of packages, and New Day has them too, and they're like a database, but they're clunky, and you saw that with Central Savila, or with EMR Bear, like they can't go in and easily.
Yeah, they are actually. We are interested. We met. I don't know. We can discuss this later, but it is what they're going to look at next. It's up and running, and they want to evaluate the transition into it.
To EMR.
Yeah, it's up and running. They're using it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the experience.
So a couple of announcements before we start sharing. Melissa and I will linger for about 15 minutes after the end time of this workshop. If you want to keep discussing issues pertaining to your data-related issues, software, output of data. And also let you know that in next session, we're going to have space for questions regarding logic models, and we're gonna just summarize what we did today, but there will also be room to keep on asking questions. Now, are there, this is the sharing time, so if you have, if you are willing to share yours, let us know. There is a reactions button in the front that can give you a thumbs up. If you can push the thumbs up, or you can just unmute your microphone and tell us. All right. Thank you, Jenna. So can we allow Jenna to share her screen to tell us, or if you want to share your screen, let us know too. And you can share what you did. Go ahead and unmute.
One sec, let me figure out how to screen share.
Hold on, I have to give you permission.
Okay.
Okay. I think you should be good.
I don't know how pretty it looks. I guess I'm not savvy enough to do it.
So at the bottom, if you hit the green arrow where it says share screen, it should give you options of.
I actually have the other screen. Okay, wait. Okay.
There you go.
Does that work?
Yes.
So I used the second, the lower down version.
So can you tell us a little bit about what your organization does so we have a bit of context of what we're looking at?
So my organization is a community arts organization, and it has an education program that brings STEM arts education into the schools and holds workshops and things like that. And we're kind of in the process of reevaluating what that looks like. So this is really helpful for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's a question. If people have questions, why don't you go ahead and just ask, especially if you're asking of Jenna.
Go ahead, Jacob.
I was just gonna ask, I don't know, like, so I feel like I'm behind for some reason, because like she has all this stuff typed in and already has all this stuff, and I felt like we just had like 10 minutes in the chat, and she has this and I don't have anything but like a couple of things written on paper. So what am I missing as far as how people got to this point already? Does that make sense?
Jenna, how'd you do that?
Yeah, right.
I took a grant writing class over the past 3 weeks where we had to work on these things. So I already put some of this information in another document.
Okay. Because somebody else that we had in the chat had one too. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of information for 7 minutes of brainstorming there. But okay. And so, but on this, is this something that like in the future, in this training that we're going to do ourselves, or is this something like that for the training moving forward? Is this kind of already expected?
So we don't expect you to come with anything but what you already have.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The second thing, and I don't know if this reassures you or not, it takes a while to put together a logic model.
Okay.
And there is a lot of discussion. I apologize for not remembering who asked this question. I think it's Angeli who asked the question on, well, what if it's confusing what's a resource, an input versus an outcome? Those debates are super common as well.
Okay.
So you can sit down and do your own, then you bring it to somebody who's in a different position in your organization, and they come from a whole other perspective, tell you, no, I would think that's more of the result of what we do more than a resource. And it is an interactive process that takes time. The fact that you got to write 2 or 3 things is awesome.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
yeah, we work with our partners, and we set up 3-4 meetings just to lay out a logic model if they don't have one. So don't worry about it if it feels like it takes a while.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So any other questions that you guys might have, feel free to do. And if there's somebody else who wants to share, feel free to speak up. I don't have the full set of images with the thumbs up, but if you want to go and share what your thoughts were, feel free to do it now.
Well, one thing I want to add is before just because we're getting to the end, is that it would be great if before the next workshop, if you had a chance to look at the templates and at least try to do one column, like at least try to do the outcomes, because having an outcome or an output and the kind of outputs that I think it was, I don't remember who was talking about the qualitative, it was Lena. If you have outputs or outcomes, that's what you'll need. You'll just need one of those to start to do the rubrics. But those templates are available to you. And the hardest thing, honestly, well, the hardest thing is getting started, because you have to set out the time, right? You have to set out the mission time. But if you can put it in your calendar, like I'm going to do this before the next workshop, that would be great.
Okay.
There was one question or one comment in the chat. If you want to just ask, go ahead.
Hi, this is Lena. I think there's a bunch of people with questions.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, I have a SWOT analysis of the organization, which is strength, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities. And I'm wondering how I can fit that here. And it seems to me that it probably will all fit under resources, right? All the SWOT analysis.
So it would be a matter of laying out how you, or seeing how you wrote it, because it's hard to answer a simple yes, no, without knowing the specifics of it. So as I said, we're going to linger a little bit afterwards if you want to share some more. Okay, so in the spirit of time, because we have 4 more minutes left, so let me just walk you through a few takeaways. So in summary, your logic model will show you your program's goals, outcomes, activities, and resources, and how they're linked together. It will lay out why your program is effective at achieving its goals. Those are your assumptions, why you think that your actions are linked to the outcome and how that happens, as well as the challenges that are outside your sphere of control. You can always use, and it is used or should be used at least, as a blueprint of what you need to evaluate. And they are not static. They're living documents that need to adapt with your organizations. So let me just make this a little bigger for you. So today we did logic models. We use data to collect our logic models through the information you already have, your surveys, focus groups, interviews, whatever data collection tool you have. What we're going to do on Thursday is talk about the rubric, which is not only a definition of what you're doing and the extent of quality of what you're doing, how you define whether you're doing a great job or not, but it can be used as a lens through which you interpret your data. If you are achieving your goal, the way you decide whether you achieve it is by looking at your rubric, which is what we're going to do on Thursday. And also a reminder, we have an ongoing learning community. If you want to log in or sign up for the learning community, there is a link under the here. There is a link here that is available in your slides that you can go to and sign up for the Evaluation Lab Project Echo Learning Community. And the cool thing about this is that not only you hear what other people are doing in their organizations for evaluation, but also you get to vote about what kind of topic you would like to learn about pertaining evaluation. Am I missing something about the Echo, Melissa, that you want to add?
No, that's great.
Okay. And finally, if you could please fill our own workshop evaluation survey, we would really appreciate it. We will do it again on Thursday, just to see if you have specific comments about this session or session on Thursday, let us know. But here is the link, again, also available in the slides that are in the workshop link in the Evaluation Lab website. And for those of you who want to remain and talk with Melissa and I about any evaluation questions you may have, you're welcome to do it. We'll stay around for about 15 minutes.
Claudia, can we put the link in the chat? That we're also going to email the link, but why don't we put that in the chat? That would be helpful.
Of course. Yes, no problem. The link for the survey or for
Emma just
oh, she just did. All right. Thank you, Emma.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you on Thursday, and any questions that you have, we're going to hang around, just like
Okay.
as if this were a real meeting with real three-dimensional human beings, which we all are, probably. Right?
No AI.
We're beginning to wonder.
I know, right?
Yeah, what if? What if?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know if Agnes left. She had a question.
Zachary, we had put off. So
yeah,
Zachary,
we're staying just for you, Zachary.
I was
Agnes, we will put all the materials also. I don't know when we're uploading them, Melissa, but the slides will include examples also of rubrics, Agnes, so you can see those too.
the slides are include them, and they're already posted.
They're already posted on that link on the website.
Yeah,
we're at Eval Lab. I'll put it in.
Okay.
No, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.